back to another episode of the Retail Perks. Great to be back here after a couple of weeks break, but it looks like, Gary, like as usual, when it rains, it pours. We just got a long list of guests lined up here for the next few episodes.
It's certainly going to carry us through what little is left of summer.
That's right. That's right. I'm trying to see if we can get through all of them before the summer is out. So
the clock is ticking.
And that's right. But listen, we're coming up on that big magic number of 100, and I'm thinking we should have a raffle to see who wants to be on the 100th episode and kind of do a giveaway or something. Good idea. Be a bad idea.
Good idea. All right. We certainly need to celebrate.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we got some exciting stuff coming up. We've covered some really cool topics this year. But this is one that we haven't touched. I mean, we've had a previous customer, I believe, previous guest on Retail Perks, Gary, talking about, I'd say, customer service engagement, right? Employee engagement, not so much from the sales side, but more from a corporate communication side.
Yeah.
And this is super interesting to have SparkPlug here. So I wanted to welcome Jake and Andrew to the show. Welcome, guys. Can't wait to hear from you. But if you can take a few minutes and just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about, where you came from, what you did before you started SparkPlug, and what inspired you to start SparkPlug. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. It's a really interesting story how we ended up in the retail technology world. Jake and I actually met as undergrads at Harvard studying behavioral science, both really fascinated by the ways that knowledge of the mind and knowledge of individual psychology can aggregate up into knowledge of markets and behaviors for both consumers and workers. We both went into the finance world after that. I went to a hedge fund called Bridgewater. I'll let Jake give a little bit more background on where he ended up, but that was where I learned a little bit more about the macro cycles of retail labor, how the hourly labor market is pretty consistently broken, actually. And it doesn't really serve the people who are operating businesses, nor does it serve the people who are working at businesses. So that had always stuck in my mind, and then ultimately in Jake's mind as well, as something that we could try to impact. But before we ended up doing that, we actually started our own CPG brand, a tea company, which was where we first learned the power of the point of sale employee, those very hourly laborers that we had been thinking about, on making sure that a product gets into a customer's hands.
Why a tea company?
That's a great question. When we left our East Coast finance jobs, we were so done with it. We were exhausted. We wanted to be anywhere other than there. We set out on the road and, as Jake puts it, ran out of gas around Boulder, Colorado. We were very much in the entrepreneurial mindset. We wanted to start something new. And Boulder happens to be the natural foods capital of the US. So starting a tea company just sort of felt like part of moving into an apartment there. You got your renter's insurance, and then you got your tea company as well. So kicked that off, and ended up finding that the best places for us to sell were places like spas and salons, where there were really high touch customer experience, where we could actually get in and start working with, say, a salon technician or a masseuse at a spa to recommend our product to the customers that were coming through, so that they would think about how they could use that as a part of their own relaxation routine.
You go from a Ray Dalio Bridgewater Associates to tea at salons.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big change.
Yeah, that's neat career path.
It was, a funny note that I think ultimately put me at least on my portion of the path was Ray telling folks at Bridgewater very straightforwardly, as he is wont to do, that if they want to end up in his position, then working for somebody else probably isn't the thing to do, because he didn't get there by working for somebody else. And he ultimately struck out on his own and tried to do a lot of things earlier on that ended up failing before he was able to actually start Bridgewater.
Have you heard of his TED Talk recently, the one that came out?
Yes,
connecting the dots. I guess you have the DOT program or whatever it is called, right? Yeah.
Yes, the dots. The dots are actually, interestingly enough, my experience at Bridgewater, and what Jake experienced in his time working in management consulting, particularly like HR technology consulting, informed, what we built into SparkPlug. At Bridgewater, it's all about transparency. It's all about knowing how people are performing, helping those people see how they're performing, rewarding them for that performance, and creating that feedback loop so
What does he
people can
call it?
improve.
Radical transparency. That's what
Radical transparency, exactly. So that's a philosophy that we also think fits in the retail world, because a point of sale employee at a retailer or at a restaurant is in many ways more impactful than your classic desk bound salesperson, but for some reason they aren't really rewarded in the same way. They could be moving hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise in a particular store over the course of a month, and they could be doing so at a much higher rate than the next employee over, even if they're working the same amount of hours, but they don't really receive a differential reward. They receive the same 8, 10, 12 bucks an hour that they get for putting in their time. So we think that taking some of those more desk-bound, classic knowledge worker job tenets and bringing them into the hourly worker space is a way to really supercharge some of these environments that haven't seen a lot of innovation in particularly in employee engagement over the past 10, 15, 20 years.
Wow. Jake, do you have anything to add to that? Anything to correct, by the way?
I think Andrew covered it. That all sounds about right to me. I think that to that question, the tea thing is kind of a funny leg on the journey. And looking back, I don't have a better explanation besides exactly how Andrew put it. We were into tea, and it was really at the this was 2017, so it was a little bit earlier on the CBD explosive curve, and it was a CBD herbal tea. And Colorado at the intersection of cannabis, CBD, natural foods, and tea, it really just felt right at the time, and was a great kind of foray for us into all of this, the world of natural foods and retail and brands and CPG and supply chain, and learned so much in that endeavor, and kind of topic of dots got me thinking about Steve Jobs' commencement speech, where he talks about connecting the dots, looking back, different dots, but similar dots all nonetheless. And for us, I think that those dots kind of lined up perfectly for us and have carried us forward to where we are here.
So what retail verticals do you focus on?
Yeah, so when we first got started, the CBD was that first space for us. So our initial markets were really cannabis, and continue to this day to be our primary vertical that we're serving, along with restaurants, outdoor gear, nutraceuticals. But cannabis really has been such a tremendous sandbox for us. The space is so ripe with innovation, businesses who are really handcuffed in so many ways from the traditional marketing channels that CPG are able to invest in cannabis. There's no, magazines really, where they can advertise in and reach a mass market. They're not doing billboards or TV ads, or online ads are also really challenging. So these businesses really rely so heavily on differentiating in store, and they're doing that through constant pricing promotions. It's super competitive, in-store pop-ups, training materials for these employees, and with SparkPlug incentives, the ability to pair training on why a certain product, edible, drinkable, is so much better than the competitors on the shelves, as well as aligning financial interests for those employees behind the brand as well. So as we've thought about growing and expanding outside of cannabis, we've thought a lot about what sort of other verticals are similar, and those similarities typically are a highly fractured swath of independent retailers. Restaurants also fit really well into that category. The overlap in the workforce between cannabis and the food service, restaurant, hospitality industry is really fascinating. Talked to so many bud tenders and cannabis dispensaries, and they often came from being a short order cook or a server or a hostess at a restaurant down the street. So
I like how you paused on the word high.
Yeah. So restaurants, fascinating for us, super relevant. Really anywhere where the customer walks in and asks, well, what do you recommend? And is typically faced with limited knowledge about the differentiation in products, as well as Andrew has a whole kind of formula with which he thinks about this that you might want to share here.
Gary, I'm just thinking, how do you resolve, is there a conflict between the operator of the store then and the brand? I mean, where does the incentive go? I mean, how are you doing this? Like, if I'm working at a store, is that something that I am directly doing through SparkPlug, or is it through the channels of the retailer?
Great question. Yeah, so we incorporate the retailer into the process. So we're not allowing the vendors sort of scoot around the retailer and interact directly with the employees. Instead, we're onboarding the retailer, because what we really want to enforce in this process and in this network that we're building is that win-win-win situation. We don't want it to be a scenario where retailers feel like their employees are being unduly influenced by brands in a way that doesn't align with their goals. So every incentive that a brand wants to run has to be approved by the retailer or restaurant to which it is being offered. And the retailers and restaurants can also run their own internal incentive campaigns rather than incentives oriented around a particular brand's products. They can incentivize their own private label products, or they can incentivize sales metrics like order average or units per transaction, things that benefit them by kind of rising all boats across the SKUs that they carry. So the retailer is really, really crucial, not only in that approval process, but also in the fact that by bringing in the retailer, we can actually integrate into their point of sale systems and access all the transactional information at the retailer to inform the whole sort of collaborative function of the platform. Because so much of the challenges in coordinating between vendors and retailers that we experienced when we were trying to work with big grocery stores and offer chargebacks, pricing promotions, whatever in those environments is the data, the visibility. You know, if I'm going to be spending $10,000 before I'm even getting that, 30, 60 or 90-day delayed invoice payment to sell more product through your retailer, like, I want to know where that's going. I want to know what's happening. And if I do know, and I see that it's really working, then I'll feel way more confident spending more. So a huge part of it is saying, hey, retailers, in return for getting this huge value proposition, which is your employees earning more and you not having to pay them more, while also selling more through your store, all you have to do is share a little bit of data transparently with the brand so that they can feel confident in what they're doing. That's why bringing them in is so crucial.
Yeah, I can see that working in, what I'm going to say are smaller retailers, with high touch or high engagement with shoppers, right? Where they've got time to have that conversation. Makes perfect sense. I come out of the world of supermarkets or grocery, right? Where typically that employee doesn't have time to have a 5-minute conversation. But so the parallel thought, though, that hit me right now is what you've really got, it sounds like, is an incentivized training application or program. And I'm wondering if larger retailers like supermarkets, for example, couldn't make use of your platform, to incentivize their employees to, go through different training programs, and or one of those could be training on our private label products, or the seafood supplier we use, or those types of things where it plays to their strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we think about employee performance in these environments as a combination of two things: skill and will. Skill being knowledge, selling ability, and simply, those pieces of information and, built up abilities that are ultimately going to allow you to execute on the sale effectively. But then there's will, which is something that we think is vastly underserved in the space. There's a lot of applications out there that are trying to train people, to give people more information, but there are very few applications that are trying to really motivate them to use that information or to request that information. So we think about, hey, let's start with will, actually, because what we've learned in our history in the behavioral science world is that if you motivate people to want to get to the outcome by paying them a percentage of what the store generates, even if that's at a lower touch environment like a grocery store, then they'll actually ask you for training, as opposed to you having to say, hey, take this training and sort of stuff it into their agenda and make them do it, they'll say, hey, can we actually get more training on this? Because I'm really trying to sell it, but people are asking me these questions and I don't know what the answers are. So you can create a really, really powerful scenario where, exactly like you're saying, you're incentivizing and motivating them to get trained and get better at their jobs because you're rewarding them on the other side of it. And from a functionality perspective, it's quite easy for us to do incentives that are explicitly gated by training. So you can say, hey, if you want to participate in this $1 per unit commission or this $50 per unit commission, depending on the, the type of product that we're talking about, you have to do the training first. Once you've done the training, then you can start accruing value. So it gives them a little bit more of a methodology for incorporating incentives into that training process, like you said.
Got it. So I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to rewind a little bit. So you started this tea company. How did that wind up with SparkPlug? So what was the transition? What happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially what happened was, we're working on tea. We're selling it into both these spa environments, which are very high touch, very individualized, and also grocery environments like, Sprouts across all, Sprouts locations in Colorado, which is way more, distant, data driven and, promotion driven, less about that in-person experience. But both of those scenarios were quite painful for us because in that grocery environment, we didn't have visibility into the data. We were working with a distributor intermediary. We barely got any information about what was going on in the store and what we could pay for to make things work better. Whereas on the flip side, it was hard for us to manage and wrangle all of these different, spa salon employees and get them really excited about the product at scale, or make them feel like they were getting rewarded for, sitting with us and talking with us and learning about the product. So it became very clear to us that there was something that we could build in this juncture that would kind of fill that gap. And ultimately, what really drove us into that mode was the disruption caused by the pandemic, because the supply chain that we had developed and the retail partners that we had developed when COVID hit kind of dissipated. They kind of disappeared, and it ceased to be really a viable business for us. So we thought, okay, let's be light on our feet. Let's figure out what we need to do. And we were able to take those insights and really imbue them into what would ultimately become the SparkPlug platform. And now, that has allowed us to align not only our interest in these markets, but also our passion for creating more income equality, creating more availability of, dollars for the people who are creating so much value in these environments. And, that's a mission that we've, been able to build a really excited team of both investors and employees around. So that was what really sort of launched us into it, was that disruption. And lucky for us, the cannabis industry was essentially the only brick and mortar retail industry that stayed open during COVID, because they were deemed medically necessary by many of the states they operate in. And that allowed us to grow a brick and mortar retail technology tool in the absolute worst possible time. And as a result, we were able to come out on the other side of the pandemic in a really good position to take advantage of, this sort of regain of form of the retail and restaurant world.
Wow. Interesting. Gary, you remember, must have been a year and a half ago when we were right in the middle of the pandemic. We said, this is going to spur the growth of a lot of technologies that are going to figure out how to optimize labor in retail.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening. This is really cool. It's very innovative. So where does the psychology meets retail aspect of this? Is this about how do you incentivize the frontline store personnel to drive brand sales?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, and Jake is kind of our product whiz over here. He can probably talk a little bit more about it, but it really is all about figuring out what cadence and what type of incentives are going to motivate people, and how do you have to communicate with them to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. And what types of incentives do you use?
Really vary that. I think that's where we're really pioneering incentive marketing as a really novel marketing channel for CPG businesses to invest in. They have their pricing strategy. They have traditional direct to consumer marketing, whether that's email, that's online, ads, TV. And we are unlocking incentives and the influence of frontline employees as a viable channel to market directly to customers. So we really do think of incentive marketing as a equal parts art and science, just like when it comes to launching a big email campaign. You're dialing in your copy and your creative and the color of your buttons, and you're shipping iteratively to figure out what's working and what's resonating. It's really, really similar with incentives, and there are a lot of variables to consider. There's the product and the kind of margin on the product, how much you can actually expect to be able to invest in. There's the culture of the store. Some stores that we work with are very, very collaborative, and their management is actually, in fact, opposed to the idea of doing something too competitive internally, and that's not the type of kind of culture they want to foster internally. And then some stores are fiercely competitive, and without SparkPlug, then there are employees who are competing over whose tip jar has the highest amount at the end of the day. So kind of marrying those insights, we have built SparkPlug to be extremely configurable, very customizable to facilitate all sorts of these incentives, whether it's team-based or individual, competitive or goal, or commission. And the idea is that we're enabling these brands to deploy multiple different incentives to a single store at once. And the idea is that we never have a $1 commission on an item up against $1.25, which is up against $1.50, all on competing items. At that point, it's just a race to the bottom, and it's no different than a pricing promotion or a discount. So instead, educating our brands and our customers on how to really lean into the art and science of incentives and psychology, which is a really big value proposition of our business. We've developed a lot of content, a lot of kind of knowledge and resources that we share with our customers continually about how to position their product and differentiate their offer. And instead of month over month running the same incentive, offering a $100 to the top seller at the end of this month, but then they're going to do a quarter long incentive that they'll be earning $50 for every 50 units they sell. And then interspersed there, they'll do kind of flash incentives where a Monday we'll do just a flash goal, sell 25 units, get $25. So constantly experimenting with that, taking a lot of cues from gig economy leaders. There are tech platforms in this space. DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub all have a lot of really fascinating academic research on this topic, specifically of how they're motivating drivers and other gig workers to stay on the road just a little bit longer and pick up just a couple more passengers to unlock the next bonus or the next goal. There's a lot of that sort of research that's imbued into our
how do you
product as well.
How do you measure the impact on?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things about our product and our integrations with the point of sale systems is that the proof is in the pudding, and it's undeniable. We look at all sorts of metrics around employee engagement, how much they're kind of interacting with the product. But at the end of the day, it's sales. It's the sales of the incentivized product outperforming sales of non-incentivized products. There's a lot of noise in the system, as you can imagine here. There's competing promotions, there's seasonality, and there's a lot to control for. But at the end of the day, being able to hook into those point of sale systems and automate the administrative overhead that typically would accompany a program like this also is what allows for really, really clear attribution of what's working and what's not, so that you can test and adapt on the fly.
Can you give us any specific examples of brands or programs in either grocery retail or some other related type CPG retail?
I like to keep our brand partners undercover, as sometimes they don't want to be seen driving those out into the market. But we worked with a large chicken distributor to offer incentives at pizza shops, which was an area of their network that they were seeing underperformance in relative to some of their other food service channels. Because you go into a pizza shop, you don't necessarily think like, okay, I'm going to get wings, but they wanted to really see those as increased points of distribution for them. So they offered a really simple incentive, and is a great example of how our higher volume products can be incentivized with relatively small amounts of dollar volume. So they ran essentially 25 cents per wing incentive at various different pizza shops, about 100 locations that they wanted to, push some more results through, and saw incredible results. Really significant increase in not only the total sales of the product, but also in their market share. So taking over, something like 40% of the sort of unit types sold in those retailers, restaurants, over and above what they had been seeing previously. Previously they were maybe 10 or 15%, but just during this incentive period, they really, exploded in their sort of market dominance in that particular set of locations. They were also able to resist some of the contraction in sales that locations had seen. So there were a couple of locations that had decreased in total sales, something like 40% over the course of the, the month over month period, but the chicken products had actually increased in sales. So we saw some really great sort of market outperformance. And then, lastly, we saw a really great qualitative response from the employees themselves. Employees in these restaurants get really significant value out of this, not only in dollars and cents, but also in terms of motivation and engagement. They feel more excited to actually go in and do the work. So yeah, that was a really exciting engagement that, we hope to scale to thousands and hundreds of thousands of restaurants, because you can really scale it as much as you could any campaign.
So I'm guessing this is some kind of a SaaS platform that you onboard a retailer into, requires some integrations, and then the back end there's some brand interface where they can go and participate with the retailers to set their incentives up. That kind of how it works?
Yeah, exactly right. It's essentially a three-sided marketplace in that sense. We have the retailers or restaurants onboard, integrate their point of sale system, get their employees set up, real seamless. Employees use on their end a SMS bot and a web app, mobile first.
So they have some ID per employee, so each employee is uniquely identifiable with the sale. Okay.
Yep, exactly. And then a portal for the brands and vendors, distributors to go in and create their incentives just like they would on Google AdWords or Facebook ads. Monitor the success of their campaign, double down, reset it for the next cycle, and track results all in one place.
Well, and they can load up training or educational materials or whatever.
Yeah, they can, match right alongside an incentive, training materials, a video, any sort of content that they want to just get in front of these influential employees.
Okay, cool.
So who's paying for this? Is this the retailer or the brand, or
both?
Or both?
So we have a pricing model for our retailers that is totally free, in fact. So a lot of our retailers and restaurants, they just want to accept incentives from vendors, in which case we are giving them access to the tool for free. They just click accept whenever they want to receive an incentive from one of their upstream CPG partners, no cost to them. It really is a profound offer from those brand partners and a commitment to investing in sell-through at those stores and those doors. And a lot of these retailers and restaurants very quickly become convinced of the value of incentives and how their employees are, just resonating, and how proof is in the pudding, and the sales are going up, and they are interested in leveraging SparkPlug to run their own internal incentives, that we call them, where they can offer, their own order average contest, or manager goal, or even a store versus store or location versus location kind of competition. And that is a paid subscription for those retailers.
Some kind of leaderboard functionality that allows people to kind of stay ahead of the game, so to say. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And that real-time visibility is so important. And that is, it seems simple and straightforward, but is something that we've been able to incorporate a lot of, things that we've learned in around psychology and behavior to make sure that sort of real-time visibility is very top of mind and motivating and encouraging, and showing those, those thermometers right up against the next tier.
Yeah.
So do you find that you have to constantly keep innovating on your motivational strategies? Because, I guess, after a while, there's only so much dopamine that's going to impact you. That level needs to go higher and higher to get more and more excited. So how do you keep the whole thing fresh?
Yeah, so you definitely want to avoid, that's what's called a hedonic treadmill. So a scenario in which you are consistently adding and adding and adding to the stimulus required to get the same amount of response. The best way to avoid that is actually also the best way to create the highest ratio of response to stimulus, which is intermittent reinforcement. So it's been shown quite consistently that, you put a rat in a maze and you allow them to press a button that gives them a piece of cheese every single time. They'll do that, and then it will ultimately extinguish the behavior after, 10 tries. Then a scenario in which you give them a basically random response rate of when they press the button and get the reward will maintain their connection to that button until the end of time. Essentially, it's the same reason why people love slot machines. It's the same reason why people are consistently engaging with activities that have unclear rewards.
The slot machine,
the lottery ticket, the slot machine, those structures exist for a reason, which is that people respond more when they aren't necessarily getting rewarded every single time.
There's a great book by Nir Eyal, Hooked. I don't know if you read it.
Yes, absolutely. So that's kind of that's classic, product management and product development strategy built into that book, which, we try to execute on, not necessarily by making the rewards of, say, any given commission intermittent, because when you sell a unit, you want to get the reward for that unit, but instead by creating a consistently changing style of reward structure. So that's why we offer the combination of goals, leaderboards, commissions, different types of incentive structures, where if you're actually rotating them relatively consistently enough, then you're not going to run into that hedonic treadmill effect. It's not just, okay, well, this is the same commission we get every single month. Instead, it's, oh, well, last month was a cool commission, and then they'll wait 2 months before sending another incentive, and then they'll do a leaderboard. And it's an interesting and new engagement. And we find that the behavior of selling more of that particular brand's products actually doesn't extinguish for, about 2 or 3 months after the incentive itself. So you can get a lot of juice from the squeeze of just offering an incentive, once a quarter at the given retailer and rotating your incentive types over the course of that retailer's life cycle on the platform. So it can be a really simple way of maintaining that that process.
That's very cool. So I see here you have the ability to predict the future of experiential retail. So we've been trying to do that for a while. So we finally get to hear the answer. We're at the Oracle. So Jake and Andrew are the oracles, and here we are at Orpheus and asking them, hey, what is the future of retail that you see? So what's the what are the interesting technologies that you're seeing that you think can transform retail here?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think Gary, you kind of brought up an interesting point here, which is that the future of retail is bifurcated. And to say the future of retail, I think, is minimizing the degree to which there will be different paths for different types of retail and different products. So at the highest level, it's bifurcating between experience and efficiency. The experiential, high-touch, in-store, complex purchase cycle versus the efficient grab-and-go, drop-ship, maximum speed for minimum choice strategy. We don't really play in that world. What we care the most about is that experiential world. And the reason why we feel confident in our ability to predict the future is because our experience in the cannabis industry has actually been one of the most interesting ways of jumping the line of the legacy retail operators, because cannabis as a retail vertical started about 10 years ago. And as a result, it's the bleeding edge. It's using all of the new technologies, and it's using all of the new structures of engagement that other operators can't use because, they have structural blockers. Like, they just have so much real estate that's built in a way that is going to work in this particular sense, or they have such huge legacy systems that are built around the store operating in this particular way. So what we've found is that in reality, the technologies that will kind of win the future of experiential retail are the technologies that enable you to have the most pure experience of what retail has been historically. So giving you a really efficient and motivated way to engage in a high touch experience in the store. It's not necessarily, let's create like an AR, VR, try on methodology. It's instead, how do we create the smoothest and most engaged interpersonal experience between the employee in the store and the person who walks into the store? And
you're talking about really tech being invisible, enabling an experience that's quintessential about retail, right?
Yes. And I think that
a convergence with hospitality as well, I think.
True. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I think of retail, I think anywhere where you're selling a product or a service doesn't have to be something that you can be tangible.
Exactly. Well, that's why there's sort of a spectrum here between the retail sales environment and, the desk bound like software sales environment. And the revolution of like CRM platforms like Salesforce and HubSpot, that came around and it turned one salesperson into 100 salespeople. So you could actually reduce your overall quantity of salespeople and get a greater output. And in the retail world that we're seeing, it's possible for you to actually reduce your quantity of effort and expenditure and possibly the number of people that you need, but increase the quality of their output, the quality of their connection with the customer, their motivation and ability to engage those customers in the right way, and turn your best employee into a hyper efficient person who can do, 3 or 5 times as much as they could previously and are motivated to do that, as opposed to just trying to add and build, which I think is what we're expecting to see in the world of physical retail with all the new technological innovations that are jumping in.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I would just add, you can't really talk about retail and the future of retail or restaurants without also including the current state of the labor market and the harsh post-COVID reality of how challenging it is to get employees to show up for their shift reliably and care about the work that they're doing there is kind of far and away the number one challenge that our customers are dealing with when it comes to operating their business. And that's something that SparkPlug is really capitalizing on as well at this point. And these businesses are at the end of the day competing with desk jobs, of course, and as well as gig economy jobs with like that DoorDash and like Uber, and finding ways to incorporate the most attractive aspects of those businesses and those roles, agency, kind of self-direction, flexible schedule, and financial upside are all things that we are trying to bring to the more traditional brick and mortar and restaurant hospitality landscape, where these businesses can start to position their compensation model and their ability to provide incentives and align the incentives of their workforce behind the overall goals and growth of the business with their team as something that's really compelling, very different, and is going to be one of the most talent attractions that they can do.
Cool. Very cool. So I know we're kind of running at the end of our time here, but if I had to put you in a spot and say, hey, if you had to put a word out to the retailers that says, reach out to us if you want to, how would you complete that?
Andrew, what do you think?
I think the best way would be to go to our website, sparkplug.app, sparkplug.app. Sign up for a demo there, or you can reach out directly to me, Andrew at sparkplug.app, or Jake at sparkplug.app. We are always interested in having not only conversations with folks that are a perfect fit for the platform, be they a retailer or a brand, but also employees and operators that may feel like their operator could be a fit, or consultants who support retailers or restaurants or brands that are looking to sell more, industry groups. If you have any interest in helping out the people that work with you to get their employees more motivated, selling more, or to create a new marketing channel for them, then hit us up.
So basically what I'm hearing is reach out to us if you want to motivate your employees to sell more.
Or motivate someone else's employees to sell more if you're beholden to them.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if you're a brand, right? Yeah, makes sense. Gary, anything before we?
Oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah, this is like very unique in terms of what you guys are doing. I wish you guys all the very best. And congratulations on pulling this off. It was a tough period to start a business and really get things going. So I'm sure you guys have some amazing stories to share at some point in time, but we'll keep track of you guys and hopefully get you back on at another episode down the road, and hope you guys are 10 times your size. So I heard you guys are in the process of raising a Series A, or you've already done that, or where are you?
We raised our Series A at the end of last year with some really great participants led by Lightbank and podcast world. Jason Calacanis of the All In podcast is a big investor of ours, and he's on the board as well. So yeah, we are excited about the road ahead. Hopefully when next time we're on, we'll have all of our retail predictions proven out so we can maintain
There you
our
go.
Oracle status, and we'll we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending your time here with us. We had fun chatting with you. And Gary, anything you want
Yeah.
to?
Oh, thanks for being with us. Great conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
absolutely. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Andrew. And
Thank you,
know,
guys. Thanks
yes,
for having us.
yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Make sure to join us every Monday and connect with us at the Retail Perch on Instagram and Facebook.
And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at theretailperch@birdseye.com.
Until next time, this is Shekar.
And this is Gary signing off.